Hey guys, what's up? Happy Tuesday. We are going to be continuing with our ELA work today. Went Wisdom Module 3. Except today is an interesting lesson because it's kind of a crossover lesson. And I say a crossover lesson because not only are we going to be talking about Woods Runner, but we're also bringing back an old friend. And our old friend is George versus George, okay? So for the most part, this lesson I'm going to have you guys doing is focus on George versus George, okay? And it's not a whole lot of pages, it's just 3 pages of George versus George that I'm obviously going to take pictures of and upload for you guys. But what you're going to be learning today from George versus George is going to help you understand Woods Runner as we move forward. Because part of where we are in Woods Runner right now, as we know, Woods Runner is historical fiction. So the history part of Woods Runner that's happening right now is kind of explained to you in George versus George, okay? So we have our focus question, which is what drove the Patriots to fight for their independence from the British. We have our content framing question of what does a deeper exploration of author's craft reveal in the first 3 chapters of Woods Runner, which really we're not going to be focusing on our content framing question today. We're going to be focusing more on our craft question, which is why is knowledge important when you're writing? And this should be a question that all of you should be able to answer without even watching this lesson, but this lesson is going to show you again why it's important to know about what you have to write about. And we've done that pretty much for every part of this module and for every writing piece we've had during this module, which has been at least 3 writing pieces. And so you need to have the strong base of information and know what you're talking about before you actually start writing about it. Even I've had to do some additional research in addition to reading George versus George. I've done some Googling and worked on some other stuff too. Okay, so I'm even still building my knowledge to make sure I'm sending all the right stuff to you before I teach it. Now, one thing that I want to talk about today really quickly is flashback and foreshadowing. Now, they're 2 both big F words that you see a lot in literature or in fiction text, basically. And a flashback is a memory of something that happened in the past. Now, it doesn't always have to be something that happened in the book. It can be a flashback that a certain character is having to a time before where you are in the book, okay? For me, like, I could have a flashback to a previous year of teaching, or you guys have a flashback to a previous grade of, oh, like, we did this in this grade, and that would kind of like be your flashback if you were the character in a story. And then foreshadowing is much different. Foreshadowing takes a little bit more detective work, because when you see a flashback in a text, it's very clear to see that it's a flashback, because the author will indicate that the character is thinking in the past, or they might even like distort the text. It'll be in italics or blocked off in its own paragraph or something like that. But with foreshadowing, it's a little bit different. Foreshadowing gives you a hint about what's going to happen in the future in the story, okay? So like not in the future of the world, obviously, because we're reading a lot of fiction texts, but just in terms of what's next for the characters. And it doesn't have to be the next thing that happens. It could if we just finished reading chapters 1, 2, and 3, you could get a little piece of foreshadowing in chapter 2 and then not have that thing happen until like chapter 10. Okay, it could happen really soon, or it could be a really far away thing, but it's still a hint of what is to come in the story for the character, okay? So the focus of today's lesson is researching to build knowledge, okay? And in researching to build knowledge, what we are learning about today is the Battle of Lexington and Concord. And I have some fast facts here for you, and I don't want to give you too many because part of your independent work today is going to be to have a graphic organizer with these 4 things on it. And those 4 things are the locations of the battle, and don't just say Lexington and Concord because there's a very specific location. The 2 sides that are fighting, if you've paid attention or know anything about the module, the unit that we've been doing, you know the 2 sides that were in this battle. The British attacked because. So right there, I know that tells me how the British were the ones that started and instigated this whole battle. And then the last thing is, what was the result of the battle? So for me, in kind of giving you guys some prior knowledge here and kind of giving you guys some fast facts before you read, it was hard to not give those 4 things away. But the things I can tell you are that the battle started on April 19th of 1775. So if I had been born 200 and something years ago, I would have been 3 days old when the battle started. Both towns, Lexington and Concord, are near Boston. But again, that is not the answer to the chart. There's a very specific answer to the chart. The Sons of Liberty are involved. So that's a big ding, ding, ding for the 2 sides that are fighting in the war, or in the battle, I should say. And then there's a very famous quote that people refer to about the Revolutionary War in general, but about this battle specifically, and that is the shot heard round the world. And it's round, not like round, but it's apostrophe round because that's a way of saying around, okay? So this was the shot heard around the world, and that's going to be the determining factor of who fired that shot heard around the world, and so on and so forth. But an important thing to point out, and kind of that crossover factor, is that when Isaac comes and gives information to Samuel's settlement in Woods Runner, he's referring to a battle. The battle he's referring to is the Battle of Lexington and Concord. So that's pretty cool. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take the time to read pages 28 through 30 of 26, 27, and 28 to you, 28 through 30 to you now, from George versus George. And then I will upload pictures of it so you guys can obviously read it as well. And if you're watching this, I will have already uploaded the pictures. Might make sense to open the pictures and follow along with me as I read. Got it? Did you open it? Are you looking at it? Are you there? Cool. All right, so let me write pages 28 G versus G, 28 to 30, okay? And also, before I read, don't think that just this little chart's going to be all of your work. You guys are going to have some RACS responses. And for those of you who were on the live meeting with me yesterday on Monday, you saw that your summaries and a lot of your RACS responses are very not up to where they should be. So please write me nice ones. Now, page 28 and page 29. The shot heard round the world. The British General Thomas Gage had been trying to keep the peace in Massachusetts, but was ordered in the name of the king to use more force. So the king tells him what to do. In April of 1775, a spy in Boston warned Gage that colonial troublemakers were stashing big piles of ammunition in nearby Concord. This was bad news. A bloody war could break out. Gage decided that the British Army had better go seize John Hancock and Sam Adams, 2 rebel leaders who were hiding out in Lexington. Also 2 members of the Sons of Liberty. They should burn the weapons in Concord before people started getting themselves killed. Gage quickly planned a secret raid. A British regiment shivered through the chilly night, rowing and then wading across the Charles River, which is a river near Boston, on the morning of April 19th. The soldiers had marched as far as Lexington when they came across about 70 Patriot militia gathered on the village green. The rebels were armed because rebel spies William Dawes and Paul Revere had spread the alarm that the British were on their way. And what Paul Revere is most famous for is riding his horse through this area of Lexington, Concord, Boston, all that stuff, and saying, the British are coming, ringing a bell and alerting people so they would be ready to fight the British. Everybody's nerves were on edge, now this is the Lexington part, a little something. Everybody's nerves were on edge, still holding their weapons. The Patriots began to back away and look for cover. Then someone fired a shot. Nobody knows who, but as soon as they heard it, the British soldiers started shooting. 8 Americans were killed and 10 more were wounded. Not everyone realized it, but at that time, the Revolutionary War had begun. John Hancock and Sam Adams had disappeared. The Redcoats marched on to Concord to destroy the ammunition, but most of the ammunition had vanished too. Meanwhile, great multitudes of men from farms and villages all over the countryside gathered to fight back. And then you have just this large illustration page with the speech bubbles, but I'm going to get into the actual content. Each side told a different tale about Lexington and Concord. So obviously this goes back into perspective. There's obviously going to be a British perspective and a Patriot perspective of this battle. Rebel newspapers reported that bloodthirsty redcoats burned houses, drove naked women into the streets, and butchered old men and infants. The king was told that rebel savages broke the rules of war by ambushing the army, and then they scalped fallen British infantry and cut off their ears. So basically, people are making up stories about what happened on each side. George Washington was already famous for his fearless leadership when he had fought alongside the British 20 years earlier. On June 15th of 1775, the Second Continental Congress gathered in Philadelphia and unanimously elected the 43-year-old Virginian to become the commander-in-chief of the newly formed Continental Army. And that was the Patriot or Colonist Army, the Continental Army. But how could a small, poorly trained army with almost no money defeat one of the world's most awesome military powers? Washington refused to accept any salary, asking only that Congress pay his expenses. And then it has him kind of talking to those who elected him. And then basically it just says that I was going to let you guys finish reading, but I guess I will. The next morning, long before Washington took command of his troops, the Redcoats back in Massachusetts awoke to discover an amazing sight. In just one night, about 1,200 rebels had secretly built a massive fort atop Breed's Hill by Charlestown. Both sides fought fiercely until the rebels finally ran out of powder and ammunition. The rebels ended up losing the hill, and the British lost 92 officers, more than half their men, and more than twice as many soldiers as the rebel lost. And then there's a little asterisk next to Breed's Hill, because Breed's Hill also has another name. Some say the rebels' original plan was to occupy Bunker Hill, which was higher and easier to defend. This fight became known as the Battle of Bunker Hill. So the Battle of Bunker Hill actually took place at Breed's Hill. Alright, so there, and then you guys have this part too about Bunker Hill, this large picture, if you want to take a look at 31. But you guys are focusing on the first pages I read about Lexington and Concord, okay? But reading all the way through 30 about George Washington kind of taking over and helping that situation is important as well. So you guys have to do this graphic organizer, which is uploaded for you. You guys have Rack's response questions to do. Those are in a Google document for you. And that's it. Please make sure you guys are writing quality responses. Please make sure you're turning in your work. And please make sure that you're putting in the effort that you would be if we were in school. All right. I will see you guys at 1:30 for your live. And that's it. Bye.